I'm really excited to talk about this today, and it was not easy, I'll tell you, getting the trends for residential solar lead generation down to 6 things. So there's certainly a lot to talk about. I hope you'll find what I've chosen, which I'm about to tell you in just a second, to be interesting. And I just want to emphasize, as Tom said, that we'd love to have your questions as we go. Don't feel like you have to wait to the very end to ask them. Quick introduction of me and sort of the credential that I have to talk to you all today. Energy Circle is a company that is 100% dedicated to what we think of as the better building sector. So our client base are solar installers, HVAC companies, home performance contractors, high performance builders and remodelers, et cetera. So any business that is in some fashion working towards better, more energy independent buildings. We have or can claim a client in every state and in Canada. And as a result of that, we swim in a lot of data, and you're going to see a fair amount of that today. We manage a lot of paid search within Google and Bing, and specifically track about 64,000 specific search queries in the category. Are kind of what makes us get up in the morning every day is what now we measure north of $1 billion in renewable and performance building work that we've done. So today you're going to see a fair amount of solar specific data, and just want to be clear that this comes from a mix of what I would describe as more pure solar contractors selling solar install and or battery more specifically, but as well as a number of more integrated contractors that also sell HVAC. There's thousands of leads and millions of dollars in marketing spend that go into this. But just as a caution, and I'll say this again when I get to some of that data, there is a bit of a geographic concentration of clients in this data set that is kind of coastal. So heavy emphasis on the West Coast and the East Coast. So important to kind of take that with a certain grain of salt. So here's my game plan in terms of what the 6 things that I'm going to talk about today. First is paid search advertising, and specifically its effectiveness in solar. Secondly, I want to just sort of give you some thoughts about what we're seeing in the data for the general state of purchase leads. We'll talk a little bit about the state of paid referrals, something that obviously a lot of people in looking at the solar market think is kind of the solution to high customer acquisition costs. Fourth will be a little bit of discussion about what we're seeing in terms of the manner in which potential clients are getting in touch with companies, because there's some change going on in that. Fifth will be talking a little bit about Google My Business, and specifically this phenomenon that's been known as Google as your new homepage. And I'll explain what I mean by that, but more and more interaction with companies happening before from a page in Google search before someone even gets to your website. And then lastly, I want to talk about third-party reviews. This is something we all know to be super important, but there's a few things that have changed in terms of the importance of third-party reviews going forward that I want to touch on. So that's the game plan. Again, as I mentioned, questions at any time. And I think just to give me a little bit of guidance as to what you all, which of these I should kind of give some emphasis to, Chris was going to spin up a little bit of a poll. So why don't we do that now, Chris? Great. So the question here, just to give a sense of prioritization, is which marketing channel or what marketing channel are you most excited about in 2019? Purchase leads, events, digital marketing, traditional media, or a more integrated approach? And if you could just, give us, we're forcing you to choose one here. I know that's not particularly fair, but just trying to get a sense of that. So Chris, I'll let you I know you can see the results. I can't. Great. So good. Well, so pretty interesting. A little, tie at 42% for digital marketing and integrated approach, which I I would certainly advocate. Interesting to see not much in the realm of traditional media, but purchase leads and events kind of at about 8%. So good. But that's helpful and pretty consistent with what I'm about to say. All right, good. So let me go. Two things that I wanted just to say before I go into these 6 things. A key factor and one of the use cases for why your own digital marketing can be important is this question of the ownership of your marketing assets. And one of the things that is a unique aspect of the solar industry is the fact that there have been so many opportunities, and that the segmentation of the lead generation side of the business going to so many lead aggregators that many companies found themselves in a position in which they, what we call sort of had surrendered some of their assets. So in other words, the point here is that when you have an over-reliance on purchase leads or pay-per-performance, or let's say you outsource canvassing, or potentially we'd see this a fair amount is outsourcing websites to some kind of proprietary thing, you don't necessarily control that asset versus taking control of it yourself, in which case, all of those assets, your website, the AdWords account that you may be working within, the incredible treasure trove of data that exists inside of AdWords, your website, which is an asset that will grow over time if you keep a modest investment in its content and its SEO, your analytics account, recording of call tracking. So all of those improvements accrue to your company and should float all boats in an increasingly powerful way over time if you control them. One of the things I'm going to talk a lot about today is conversion rate, and I just wanted to clarify because it comes up a lot in each of the discussions and what I mean by that. When I talk about conversion rate, what I'm talking about is I've got 100 visitors to come to a website, since that is for the most part the primary place where we're measuring the success of our digital marketing efforts. I got 100 people to come to a website. What percentage of them was I able to convert into some form of usable lead? Now, and that typically happens in the case of either form completion or a telephone call that we can track, or increasingly a chat session, and we're going to talk specifically about that. But I just wanted to clarify, that's what I mean by conversion. In a perfect world, the lead that comes via a website gets logged into a CRM system, and at that point there is a qualification procedure that happens to determine if that is really a lead. And in a perfect world, that's what we would call a lead. In digital marketing, very often the thing that we can most measure is we were able to capture that name, etc. So just wanted to introduce that. And you can see here, across about 33 contractors that I sort of just cherry picked from last year, pretty broad range. You've got some people just absolutely crushing it in the 19% conversion rate, and others, at more 3%. A lot of factors go into that, but that's what we mean when we talk about conversion. So I'm going to start with Google paid search advertising, and this is often talked about as paid pay-per-click or Google Ads, formerly known as Google AdWords, and now they call it Google Ads. And if Bing is still a player, Bing, Microsoft's product, is still a player at maybe 15-20% for those that have sufficient budget. Just to be clear, what we're talking about are those usually 4 positions at the top of a search result when someone searches for a particular service, in this particular case, solar installation contractor. One of the use cases and reasons to think about using paid search is the growing amount of real estate that you are given in a paid ad. This green box at the top, you see West Coast Solar really taking full advantage of the copy within that relative to the three other competitors that show in this particular case. I want to emphasize back to the conversion rate point that generally speaking, across all the different mediums that we utilize in digital marketing, the conversion rates tend to be the best for paid search. And the reason for that is that well-structured paid search campaigns tend to have commercial intent. In other words, the search term that we are campaigning on, the ad that we are showing, is an ad about buying. It is getting closer and closer to the point of that person that is really looking for the service. And consequently, because of that commercial buying intent, we tend to get higher conversion rates in paid search than other mediums. Organic is often the next best, and social, which in a lot of cases this means Facebook, tends to be kind of challenging from a conversion rate standpoint. Not that 2.6 is necessarily terrible, but tends to be challenging because of the nature of traffic within Facebook not having as much commercial intent. Here's some real-world example of the kind of performance that we're seeing on a pay-per-click basis, and we'll come back to some of these other lines, but I want to just focus for now on the one in the red box. 95 leads, a total lead cost of $156 a lead. In this case, this particular company had a 60% lead to sit ratio, a 27% sit to close, resulting in 15 jobs, or a customer acquisition cost in this particular case of $963. So judge for yourself whether those economics are good for you. Most companies would say for a $20,000 to $25,000 install that a customer acquisition cost in the range of $1,500 is pretty acceptable. So in this particular example, 963 looks pretty good. So I will emphasize that these are, this is a well-tuned and mature account that is, been going for some time. A little bit of information about cost per click, and this is where I want to be cautionary about the data. These are big buckets of search terms around solar energy system and rebate, which would include tax credit, panels, and install, and contractor, and solar company. And this is some mushed together data, lots of companies in terms of what you might expect to be paying on a per click basis. And so the sort of takeaway from this particular slide is that the most commercial intent solar install tends to be the one that has the highest cost per click, the most competition, and the most willingness amongst the competitors in that market to pay more to get that click. Conversion rate, back to that holy grail of what matters the most, is and this is a sort of a mix-up here, and interesting to see that solar energy system and solar panels tend to be a little bit on the low side. You do everything you can to sort out the buying intent in those, but there can be some mix in there. Rebate and tax credit tends to perform really well. Install, while that has the most commercial intent, it therefore is also the most competitive, and so the challenge to get good conversion is there, but this is around 7. And then you see solar contractor and solar company, which are kind of interesting euphemisms for the same concept, but in this experience, higher conversion rate. So cautionary here. There's a lot of things that go into this discussion. But I wanted to do this for the purposes of giving you kind of some relativity about what you might expect for both conversion and cost per click. It's very important to say that the way paid search works is through continuous improvement over time. 3 examples here of kind of total cost per lead across their campaigns in typical fashion, year over year, accomplishing at least a 30% or higher reduction. So it is very much a process of continuous improvement and tuning. So let me stop there, and I'll just, before I move on from the purchase from paid search, just want to see, Chris, were there any questions before I go on?
I'm just looking right now.
No?
I'm just going through them. Someone said Google Ads work great when paired with Facebook retargeting tools. I agree. Someone said with paid search, what are the reasons that it tends to not work out that well?
Yeah, good question. So I would say that the main reasons that I see people trying and then abandoning at Google is, first of all, not giving it enough time to do that continuous improvement. Budget matters. The more you can spend, the more data you get, and the more data you have on which to make kind of decisions and move back and forth in terms of the optimization. And then the other thing that I would say is super critical is the experience on the website where the conversion takes place. And you might call this a landing page. More often than not, it is in fact a landing page. But it is how good that experience is. There are lots of factors that go into that, including quality score and the way Google measures the relevancy of the ad to the landing page. But a really quality experience, leading with your best information at that point, and causing that conversion to happen. If you aren't well tuned in terms of those landing pages, that tends to cause issues. All right. I mean, in the interest of time, I'm going to just keep on going.
I was just going to say that there's a few people that have asked specific questions about pay-per-click, and either we'll just get to those at the end, or the LinkedIn group would be a good place that we can do those after the whole thing.
Great.
So
my hope is to get through this. Yeah, my hope is to get through in time for some questions at the end, so we'll come back to those. So, okay. All right, purchase leads, and I just want to give a little bit of sense of the state of the state, and this is through the lens of the folks that we're working with. Back to some of this data that I shared before, and now focusing in a little bit on. There's two lines here related to purchase leads. One is a non-exclusive, and the other is an exclusive. And so in the first case, 250 leads at $29, 20% lead to sit, 10% sit to close, 5 jobs. The customer acquisition cost in this case of $14.50 is still, so it's higher than what we looked at before, higher than organic, higher than pay-per-click, sort of on the edge, in my opinion, of economical with respect to, 1,500 is a kind of good target number, I think, for full customer acquisition costs. But the main issue here, obviously, is that in a non-exclusive basis, is a horse race to get that appointment, these tend to inherently be price shoppers, so that your sit to close ratio tends to be on the lower side. Interesting here, and it's a much smaller data set, but $125 exclusive lead really performed pretty poorly. I mean, pretty expensively in this case. One sold job out of 20. So there's a general sense that, and I think I hear this from almost all of our clients that I talk to, that the purchase leads market is in a certain state of decline. It's saturated. There's a lot of companies out there, even some of the ones like EnergySage that had previously kind of stood for a pay performance model, have started to mix in a pay per lead model, so that there are, and those are, I would say, those are quality examples of companies that are generating leads based on really good content, like in the case of EnergySage, but at the same time generating them on the basis of finding you the lowest cost contractors. So there's a lot of people out there, and some of those quality companies stand out a little bit less. Those lead aggregators are spending more aggressively, so their spend is greater in the market. There's lots of competition. Those of us buying leads are competing with many others that are buying leads. As I've mentioned, conversion and close rates tend to be in decline. And sadly, I think we all know this to a certain extent, some of these lead aggregators are kind of on the sleazy side, right? They're acquiring leads through some fairly sketchy practices in social media and so forth, and so it's a little bit tough. At the end of the day, I think the point that we like to make is not to be completely anti-purchase leads, but to make sure that when you think about purchase leads, they're they're a part of a healthy mix. There is a certain beauty to them in the sense that you can, wake up in the morning, not feel like your pipeline is not where it needs to be, and go buy some leads. That, to me, makes a lot of sense, provided that you are measuring it. If, like this example on the far right, if you are overly dependent on purchase leads, you're in that situation I mentioned at the very beginning, where you really kind of outsource too much of your asset in this particular case, and you are at some risk of those not particularly working. So our belief is it should be, it can be a good part of it, as long as you've got really strong metrics in place to measure whether it's working or not. I'm going to keep going, and Chris, if there are any questions on these individually, you can just stop me, but I'll keep going in the interest of making sure we have some time at the end. I want to talk about paid referrals, and many folks in solar. This is certainly coming from the folks at Green Tech Media, who do some really good data on customer acquisition cost across the industry. Many people have pointed to paid referrals as sort of the savior or the antidote to the high customer acquisition costs that have existed across solar. And so the question is it working? And our take is that, I think the quick summary of what I'm saying on this slide is that if you have a very proactive program, that it can be, paid referrals can be a meaningful slice of the pie of where your leads come from. But simply hanging out a web page that says, hey, we pay $400, $500 for a successful referral, tends not to do a lot without an active campaign behind it. So our view and our sort of experience with the folks that we're working with is that most everybody has some kind of a program in place, but not many companies are producing a lot of volume. And I think the reason for this is that when I talk about a more active referral campaign, it inherently means that you have got to be more actively cultivating the people doing the referring. There is certainly a mix of people. Some people are not going to do anything. Some people are going to make one referral. And there are a few people, those unicorns, that will, make their Christmas spending out of doing referrals. They'll actively do it. But we don't see too many examples of people that are doing this kind of cultivation and nurturing. So consequently, what that means is that repeat referrals tend to be rare. This concept of ambassadors are few and far between, and a fantastic customer experience does not automatically always result in that happening. You have to be active and really ask and work hard to make those referrals happen. I don't see a magic number in terms of what the referral amount should be. There's a broad range out there. We know of someone who pays $1,500, right? If that's my tolerable customer acquisition cost, they're willing to pay that. I'm not sure that that's really lighting the world on fire. I'd say if the bell curve seems to be mostly in the $400 to $500 range. There is some split as to whether or not people want to give 100% of the incentive to the person making the referral, or some folks really like the idea of a split referral, so that there is a benefit to the person making the referral and a benefit to the person purchasing as well. We have some small examples of experience where charitable organizations were the recipient of the referral, and in the right situation, those seem to work really well. And then generally speaking, I think, there are a couple of products out there that are dominant in the industry, Get the Referral being one. A few folks are using this software called Ambassador. They tend to be a little bit on the pricey side, and there's advocates and folks that feel like they could be better, but overall they tend not to be perfect. So I'm going to keep going, and again, Chris, interrupt me if there's any questions on the particular topic. The next thing I want to talk a little bit about was this changing manner in which folks are communicating with us, and I like to refer to this as the rise of the instant gratification customer, meaning that in the internet fast-paced kind of quick action world that we live in, we see more and more people wanting to get a quick answer to their inquiry versus waiting for it. And so for the longest time, the primary medium in which we tended to capture leads on a website was via a lead form. Had the advantage of being able to get address information so that we could evaluate the home, et cetera. Increasingly over the last, let's say, 3-4 years, we saw the rise of the phone, and I'll show you some data on that in just a second. But the phone became a much more surprisingly more prominent way that people contacted, and increasingly today we're strong advocates of having live chat capability, or at least starting to prepare yourselves for the eventuality of live chat. People want to use it. It has to be a good experience. And at the end of the day, it means that somebody on your customer service staff or someone in inside sales has to be good at this particular form of communication. But more and more people, especially as the millennial generation starts to come into homeownership and starts to be a more relevant audience for all of us, it's more and more important. So those big three, the leads, phones, and chat, tend to be the others. But there's a lot going on. I'm going to talk in a second about Google My Business. There is messaging capability within Google My Business. There is messaging integration and capability from within Facebook Messenger. You obviously, probably anyone who's purchasing leads is getting bid requests from those. There is some speculation, it doesn't exist right now, that there's a possibility of bid requests coming from Google. Most of us know that Project Sunroof is no longer being monetized by Google, but nothing to say that they couldn't go back to trying to monetize that and passing on bid requests. There's a product that has become very popular in HVAC called Local Services Ads by Google, which is a price per lead product. Doesn't apply to solar yet, but lots of people think it could easily go there, and text messaging. So a lot changing, but the theme here is that people want quick action. This is 135 Energy Circle websites from last year, and I just wanted to give emphasis to this fact that phone and live chat tended to be much larger percentage of the way in which people contact than web forms. And I think this has a lot to do with this concept of instant gratification and the assumption that you're going to get a faster, more specific answer, and that a form does not necessarily give you confidence that or trust that there's going to be a quick response. So we need more data on live chat, but we're seeing it. The companies that are deploying it are making really effective use of it.
Peter, I got a question on live chat. If people are looking for instant answers, do you find live chat to be effective? Most of the time, the live chat is third party and evasive to answering.
Well, yeah. So we're advocates of owning the live chat yourself and not outsourcing it to a third party. Most of the folks, and I don't believe I can say that there's I know anyone in solar who has tried an outsource, but many of the people who have tried it in other sectors, in the HVAC sector, have abandoned the outsourced approach because it was not a satisfactory experience, right? So because it's not quite as simple as just scheduling an appointment, which is what those outsourced services tend to be good at. The modern chat software companies have really good ways of separating the people who are kind of question answerers, who might be, a mom helping their kid with a book report, versus somebody who's really looking for a quote, versus maybe one of your existing customers who needs a cleaning or something like that. So really good ways to kind of filter that and make sure that you're getting the real sales opportunities, the true leads funneled into the right place. But as I said before, we're big advocates of, finding that person inside, and it usually can be one to start, right? Somebody who's good at this, who's from that age group, and is good at it. All right. The no-click lead, and this is a kind of a phenomenon that's been talked a lot about in local search circles, and particularly it's around Google My Business. And the concept here is that this page, when someone searches for your company and gets your brand search page, right, which is what this page would look like, is increasingly rich with so much information that we're finding that more and more interactions with companies are happening from this page without necessarily ever visiting a company website. And if you just quickly scan down, what you see in the left-hand column with all of the organic listings, you've got, reviews being very, very prominent, from, Facebook to Yelp to Guild Quality, in this case, to Better Business Bureau, even what it's like to work at your company. All of these third-party things that are given so much organic ranking prominence by Google. And then you have the right-hand column, all of that information coming from within your Google My Business profile. This was formerly known as the Knowledge Panel, and just in the last couple of weeks, Google has started calling it the Business Profile, which makes a lot more sense, but an enormous amount of activity in there, and some exciting new things. If you guys aren't using or experimenting with Google Posts, which is like a little post that goes up for 7 days and then comes down, we're finding that those are very effective. The questions and answers are very effective, and making sure that you're really paying attention to the reviews from the web. In this particular example, they're showing Facebook and Guild Quality, but there tends to be a mix of things. So very important. One example of one contractor over the course of a couple of months got 49% of all web-originated phone calls came from that business profile panel. We tracked it by a tracking number, and it was a fairly stunning number when we learned that. I do want to emphasize
one question about Knowledge Panel, Peter.
Yeah.
So someone said, and this is like just a really actionable question, is how do I know if mine is good enough or not? And if it's not, what do I do about it?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I think I'll go back for just a second. And there's, we've done some other webinars, and I think part of the guidance we're getting from today is what to focus on going forward. I would say the most important thing you go down the panel. Quality photography is really important, but nothing is probably as important as the star rating of your reviews on Google. And just to be clear, what you see, the stars you see showing under Boston Solar, those are just Google reviews, okay? Getting your category right, which I'm going to talk about in just a second, making sure all your data is accurate, making sure those reviews from the web are good, right? That your averages are good in what is showing there, which you don't have any control over. And lastly, the review snippets you see down below, where Google algorithmically pulls 3 things in, making sure that those are quality and preferably containing important keywords those are kind of the main things that I would look at to judge the quality of your Google My Business panel. I do want to particularly emphasize the categories in which you list yourself. So for the longest time, really the only thing in solar was solar energy equipment supplier. And I think many companies that got started, even back in the Google Places days, chose solar energy equipment supplier and have not changed it. And over the course of the last year, the new options include solar energy company and solar energy contractor. We're trying to do some research on which one of those tends to be better. I think our leaning is towards company. The point is you get 10 places in which to categorize your company within the Google My Business system. The first one, what you list as your primary category, is the most important. It's the one that's the most visible and generally conceived to be the one that Google gives the most weight to. But you can list all of them. And so you see, for example, solar hot water system supplier, solar photovoltaic power plant, which is it's kind of where these things come from. Nobody quite knows, but it's a little bit odd. But if you're in community solar, that might not be a sort of an irrational one to have. But use them all. Use all 10 spots if you can. These 5 are really the only ones that have anything related to solar. All right. Last thing I wanted to talk about was third-party reviews, and we've all known how important they are. They're becoming even more important. And so first and foremost, ticked on, Southern Energy Management, who's doing great in this particular case. But the first point we all know is that it is just impossible to hide from these reviews. They, in a brand search in this case, you see Facebook showing up with stars and Yelp showing up with stars, and BBB would show up with stars if they had them, and even what it's like to work there with Glassdoor reviews and solar reviews, and then the Google reviews on the right, the stuff in the review panel. It is a review-driven world and really important. This is a study that gets done annually by a group of local search professionals, and between 2017 and 2018, one of the biggest changes in terms of what they viewed to be a ranking factor for getting into the into the local pack, which I'll show you in just a second, reviews came up year over year almost more than almost anything else. So increasingly viewed as one of the key ways to rank in that local pack, the area in the blue, which is a difficult thing to do because Google is very biased towards the proximity in terms of the ranking in there. So the challenge most of us have in terms of overcoming the proximity penalty, what I mean is if I'm doing a search from my office and Google increasingly knows through my phone and so forth exactly where I am, what they're showing me in terms of these results are the physical addresses that are closest to where I'm searching from. So pretty irrelevant from the standpoint of us, right, as service area businesses. But that's the bias that we're all trying to overcome, and reviews tend to be one of the ways to do that. So they become more important for ranking in search. Quantity matters more, and I'll tell you what I think you need to be thinking about or aiming for in solar in just a second. Diversity is starting to matter, and so this is getting beyond Google, beyond Facebook, beyond Yelp, beyond solar reviews, whatever is out there. Diversity is starting to matter more, and the keyword text in those reviews we're finding is really driving organic search performance. So a bit of an art form to how you try. It's enough to request and get reviews. The art form then is how you get people to say they did a great job installing my solar panels, so that you get those keywords in there. We think that the new standard for most companies in solar is 75 or more reviews. And when I say the new standard, this is partially competitive, right? And this is partially ranking factor. So there are certainly a number of folks, and I know many companies on this that have far exceeded 75 and have literally hundreds and hundreds of Google reviews. There are also folks that just haven't given it that much focus, and in our view, kind of need to. So those were the 6, and I think I did pretty good, Tom, in terms of the timing. So I know, apologies if
absolutely.
If any of that was super rushed, but happy to take questions.
What are your thoughts on using Facebook retargeting tools in addition to Google Ads?
So we're a big fan of Facebook, both retargeting as well as custom audience development. As long as you put Facebook in its place. You recall that slide that I showed, which had conversion rates. So Facebook tends to be more of a awareness building medium than it is necessarily a conversion medium, right? It's taking someone out of the Facebook environment and getting them to, to act like a buyer tends to be a little bit difficult. But the capabilities that Facebook now has for creating custom audiences, where you can upload your email list, get a match to that, tell Facebook to give you lookalikes for that, and build up that audience, is very, very powerful, and we're finding very, very effective. Same thing with using video advertising to build your pools of custom audiences, and then starting to, as you can build those custom audiences and people who have had a certain level of interaction with you, you can essentially start to build a funnel and move people from, let's say, the top of the funnel in a much more awareness building kind of mode down into the middle of the funnel, where they're inching their way towards buying intent. So we're big fans of it. The targeting some of the targeting has been taken away from us because of some of the privacy concerns, but still pretty extraordinary in terms of what you're capable of targeting on, and very relatively inexpensive. I mean, quite cheap. Honestly, when you get that targeted, it's hard to spend very much money. So we're big advocates of having Facebook in your mix.
Another question that's paid search related is there an accessible list of solar keyword search terms?
Chris, I turn to you. We've published a couple over time. The one thing I would emphasize, and this gets to one of the points I made earlier about sort of the longevity of paid search terms. We know, because we're working in solar across the country, we know kind of what the core set of terms are that are the most important. And however, once that is established, unique things happen in almost every market that you couldn't necessarily predict. That somebody in East Bay in California is really performing really well on a particular search term that is entirely different than somebody in Massachusetts. And so yes, there's a kind of a master list, if you will. One of the things we all know is that the search terms are becoming more and more complex, the actual search queries. So particularly as people talk to their devices to do searches, and people become more trusting of the search engine in terms of asking questions, the diversity of search terms is really growing. The old days of the bell curve being almost 100% two-word searches, solar installer, are less and less the case now, and it's the so-called long tail of lots and lots of different search terms. How do I know whether my house is a good candidate for solar? Literally, that's the kind of search queries that we're starting to see.
Yeah. I would also add on search terms that having the right search terms is critical to success, but having the search term be correct itself is not even close to guaranteeing success. So you still need like the right bidding strategy, landing page, like all of those, like ad text copy. So it's an element, but someone could give you the perfect list of 20 keywords and you not have a successful campaign. So something to like think about when planning paid search.
Yeah. One other point to make about the when I mentioned the value of the data inside of Google AdWords is, there's no better source of good keyword data for your company or your company in your geography than what specific search terms are converting the best. And so, like I said, that becomes the very best. No amount of keyword research that you might do using, Google tools or, Answer the Public or all the various kind of keyword research tools are out there. Nothing is as good as what actually converts for your company. And so that becomes a very important source of information about how to prioritize your organic search engine optimization work and your content on your website.
Excuse me. Question, is the 75 plus review recommendation across multiple platforms, Google, Facebook, Solar Reviews, or specifically Google? And I guess I would also add the second part of that question is what happens post 75? Like why do we care so much about that threshold?
Good question. So first of all, the 75 recommendation in Solar is just Google reviews, and so that we arrived at that by looking at a lot of companies across the country to try to see kind of where are most companies. It's high, believe me. It wasn't very long ago that my advice was make sure you get to 5, and then after 5 get to 10 because that's a ranking factor. So what goes into our recommendation about 75 is competing with the rest of the sector in solar, and where we think because of that competition, because in general some quality solar companies are really doing well on Google reviews, we think that's the number where it is a ranking factor in terms of where you would show up, particularly in that local pack. So granted, it's a intimidating number if you're at 10 or 12, something like that. I know a lot of folks on this call are in the 300s, but that's our thinking.
I'd also add that I've heard anecdotally, I don't know if this is around the 75 number, but I've heard anecdotally from folks that we've worked with that once their reviews get to a certain number, their salespeople start to people in homes start to tell them, oh, I saw your reviews and they look great. So there's also an impact on the sales funnel itself.
Yeah. One other thing, and I don't believe quantity is anywhere near as important on the other platforms. And so when you think about if you do that kind of searches that I just described for your company, and you see, for example, that Yelp is ranking highly, or Solar Reviews is ranking highly, or Better Business Bureau is ranking highly, the first priority is just to make sure for the visible ones that are showing that your review averages are strong. But in the case of something like the Better Business Bureau, if that's 2, that's probably fine. I think in Yelp, again, Yelp is of differing importance in different parts of the country. And so if you're in the West Coast and in the Bay Area or California, it's a legitimately important thing, and lots of Yelp reviews are important. In lots of other parts of the country, it's just making sure that your Yelp averages are okay, which is if you're going to get a cranky review, it's probably very well might happen on Yelp, so that can be a challenge.
Yeah. We are getting a lot of questions around like SEO, percent to spend on marketing budget. I think those are all great questions. I think I kind of want to keep the questions actually to these 6 though, but I would say with those, just post those in the LinkedIn group because those are all really good. All really good to answer. This is from the pay-per-click section. Do you have a suggested percent of marketing budget to allocate to paid search?
Good question. I don't really, because I think it's too individual an answer with respect to where you are, how big your footprint is in terms of your market, how competitive a market, which inherently goes to, is it a competitive solar market? How dense is it? And how widely are you trying to compete? So it's hard to answer. I do think, and we are finding that there is certain thresholds in terms of how much you want to spend. Not to say that you can't, get your feet wet with $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 a month in click spend if you want to just get started. That is certainly doable, but it is, it's an expensive category in search, right? It's different than selling $4,500 ductless mini splits, although many folks maybe on this call may be doing that as well. Selling $25,000 systems is an expensive category in search, and so you do need to have a certain amount of budget, but I don't think I can really adequately answer how much. A factor to think about when you think about what percentage should go to PPC is really from the standpoint of where are you starting from, and how urgent is your need for leads. I don't want to create the impression that pay-per-click advertising is instantaneous. It takes a while to optimize and get up to speed, but of all the things that you can do in digital marketing, it is the one that is kind of flip a switch and it's going, right? Stuff will start happening versus an organic strategy, which is going to pay off long term, and it's kind of the long game. But if you're not performing strongly in organic now, that's going to take you 12 months, 18 months to really get up to speed. So a lot of it has to do with where you're starting from. I like the analogy of how far up the mountain are you, and how big is the mountain you need to climb.
Yeah. And one thing I was talking with a fellow this morning around how long does it take and does it work? Because I've also been getting a lot of SEO questions. Is the interesting thing is that we know that lead sellers are generating a lot of leads, and they are only really using paid search and organic search traffic. They use a little bit of paid social, but the proof is in the pudding that they're doing it effectively. So it's not, the question I think is not whether it does work or not. It's known that it works. It's just is it right timing for a specific business?
Mm-hmm.
That we're at time right now, so I want to be respectful of people's time. So if people want to stick around, they can, to do a few more questions. Peter said he would. A few people have asked about the LinkedIn group. That's a private, and what the name is it? That's a private group that you have to join. So that link will be getting sent to people both that attended and that weren't able to attend. So you can click on that in the post-event follow-up, which the recording and slides will also be in. So that's how you can get access to that. Peter, you have time for a few more questions?
Yeah, I'm absolutely fine. And also, easy to find me at peter@energycircle.com. So I don't mind, taking some of those questions directly if we run out of time.
Okay. I'll say this. This next question is: so how does one learn more or get started with Google My Business? And I'll ask that, Peter, and you can't give me the sarcastic answer to that question.
I'm not sure I know what the sarcastic answer is.
The sarcastic answer is to Google that.
Oh, got it. Okay. Yeah, I'm operating on the assumption that most folks on this call have claimed their Google My Business profile. That may not necessarily be the case. So if that's, first and foremost, claim it. You have to go through a little verification process, which might be a phone call, it might be a postcard, make sure it's there. And then do the things that I mentioned. Make sure, your categories are correct. Make sure your photos are good. And then start to utilize some of the more interactive things that are available. These Google Posts, really quite easy, by the way. It doesn't require a rocket scientist. Their Google Posts can be anything. You can put a little image up of the latest great quote, testimonial review that you got. You can do a promotion. You can do a link to a blog post. There's all kinds of things. It's okay, by the way, confirmed by Google local staff to us that you can ask yourself questions. And so make sure that there's no unanswered questions in there, that there's a fair amount of confusion amongst users as to what that question thing is. We've seen some situations where people kind of think it's live chat sort of. So you get these questions of, are you open right now? Things like that. But it's okay to ask yourself questions. So populating that makes a lot of sense. And more importantly than anything, just making sure your Google review averages are really good, and then working towards those quantities.
I'm getting one from earlier. Someone said, what is the difference between exclusive and non-exclusive lead? I believe this was around purchase leads.
Yeah, so non-exclusive is typically the lead is getting sold to at least, to you and to at least two other companies, sometimes more, depending on who what the aggregator is that you're buying from, versus an exclusive lead, meaning that if you purchase that one at a higher price, like $125, it's only being sold to you. So that's what I mean. In the non-exclusive, the price looks attractive at $25, $29, $30, something in those ranges, but it is very much a horse race as to who gets that prospect on the phone first.
And speaking of the horse race, there was I believe the Success Equals Sales article that was before this in the BayWa series. One of the things to look at in purchase, actually across all marketing channels, is what is your inside sales cost to process those leads? Because a lot of the data that Peter was showing was the marketing cost per sale, but none of it looked at the inside sales cost and the outside sales cost. And I think that particularly for annual planning, people would be surprised if you plug in your own assumptions how much it costs on the inside sales track to process a lead source that closes at 1%, 2%, 3%. It's pretty expensive.
Yeah, great point, Chris. And obviously even more expensive when your sit to close ratio is low. So if you took the time to visit and quote that house and don't have a good conversion rate, that's even more expensive than the inside sales piece.
Okay, I think I think people are wrapping up. People are just saying thanks, and then
Great.
They'll see us in the LinkedIn group.
Great. Well, thanks everybody. I'll definitely chime into the LinkedIn group, and on things like how good is my knowledge panel. That's an easy thing. I enjoy doing that. So just send me an email, and I'm happy to go take a look and let you know what I think.
Great. Well, maybe I'll just jump in and give a quick wrap up. Thank you very much, Peter, for taking the time today. I'll mention three quick things. One is to reiterate to people to go ahead and sign up to the LinkedIn group. That is going to be a really great resource to get high quality answers to your questions, both from Peter and from Chris. So definitely take advantage of that group. All this information we'll be posting online to BayWa's online magazine, Solar Review. So go and check it out and get all this information. And we're going to post this video there as well and an audio version of this presentation. And lastly, for BayWa RE customers in attendance, you have the chance to win a 5-page 2019 digital marketing plan from Energy Circle. This is a great offer. Energy Circle will connect with you and help develop that plan with you together. It's limited to the first 5 attendees that connect with Energy Circle. Chris, what's the best way for folks to connect with you?
We don't have my email. I would say just email Peter.
Okay. So that's Peter. Is it peter@energycircle.com?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Yeah. So reach out to Peter if you're interested in taking advantage of that offer. And as Chris mentioned, we'll have a follow-up email coming out to folks with all that information. And finally, stay connected with us. Ask us questions. Let us know how you think the series is going. We want this to be as interactive and useful as possible. We don't want to create content that people, is not going to be helpful. So let us know what you think, and let's keep the interaction going. And yeah, that's it. Thanks everybody for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, everybody.